Good evening, everyone, and greetings from Stockholm. My name is Cliff Hazell, and I'm one of the hosts of the Flight Club. And with me this evening, we have Klaus Leopold, the co-host, and also we have Mike Freislich and Rochelle, who are joining us from Cape Town and Johannesburg, respectively. Do you want to say hi quickly?
Hi.
Hi quickly.
Hi.
Pleased to be here. Thanks for having us.
I love it when people take it literally. Awesome. So today we have invited you to come and have a chat with us. You're joining us from South Africa, and the topic that we're talking about today is managing flow, not people. Sounds like an interesting topic to me. So yeah, before we start, I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's listening on the live stream. If you like what we're saying, please feel free to subscribe. You can also join us on Meetup. We are called Flight Club on Meetup. And of course, if you want to have a little bit more of a look, understand some stuff about flight levels and what we're doing, check out flightlevels.io. We'll put all the links in the show notes and in the description later on. Cool. So without any further ado, let's get back to the topic at hand. So to kick it off, why flow? Why not people?
Interesting. You should ask, Cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, in a lot of organizations that I've been coaching in, there's often this strong emphasis on performance and on managing people. I actually remember the first time I became a manager, and I had a staff complement of one human, another Mike, as it happened. My mindset immediately shifted, and I thought, well, I'd better keep this person busy, because if I don't, I'm going to look like I was faking it before, because I told everyone I didn't have enough time, which is why I needed someone else to help. And in there lies a bit of a classic problem, I think, of management, which is I need to keep my people busy. We're paying for their time, right? So that's why not people.
Yeah.
Yes, and from my end as well, just to add into that, I think too often in actual fact with one of my clients that we're working with now, they're so focused on the individual, like Mike mentioned, that they're kind of losing the plot of the organization and why we're actually there together. And I think we'll maybe deep dive into the reasons or the benefits of creating that and making that shift in focus a little bit later as well.
Yeah, sure. So I've seen this quite a lot as well. I mean, often you have folks just focusing. We've got to keep the people busy, as you say. They're costing a lot of money. It makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, what we're saying is that we actually want to focus on flow. And if we're saying not people, I'm assuming it's not flow of people through the company. It's maybe something else. So tell us a little bit. When you say managing for flow of what? Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, in answering this, I realized that if you take the word flow and turn it around, reverse it, you'll find the word wolf, which interestingly, in times like these, in Corona, COVID times, it's quite difficult to keep the wolf from the door. And what that really means is how to keep the money flowing in and ultimately the value flowing out the door to the customer. I know, who was it? Dan Vicanti, in his book on actionable agile metrics, he spoke about flow being the movement of value through a process, which I think is a reasonably useful short description of it. So if we're focusing on how value moves through our organization and out ultimately to the customer, then we're probably focusing on something worthwhile. So I think that's kind of what flow is for me. I've got a little diagram, if you want to see it, which maybe focuses on why, or illustrates how focusing on people and keeping people busy might actually be a problem when we're trying to trying to get flow going. So if all works out, I'm going to switch my face into a picture instead. How's that?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Perfectly.
Yeah. So the opposite of flow is wolf, right? Waiting on lead forever. Which brings up a thing. There's this. I don't know about you, but I prefer not to be sitting around waiting. And I think when we're sitting at work and we've got a lot on our plate and we need to get things done, it feels really awkward sitting around doing nothing while we're waiting for something to unblock us. And so I've got two different illustrations here. And under the context of waiting is bad. And over here, we've got a situation where we've got a new requirement or a bit of value that needs to get built or produced. And we've got a bunch of people here. So each of these people is sitting and they've got some kind of a to-do list sitting in front of them. And when this piece of work arrives, it sits at the bottom of the queue and waits until the person can start working on it, at which point they do a bit of work on it. And then what happens, of course, is they've done with it and they hand over to the next person, but now it's sitting at the bottom of the next person's queue. So the red here represents the time that the item is sitting waiting, right? And then next person works on it, and so on and so forth. And what you might notice about this picture, if the red is representing waiting, this item is waiting most of the time that it's from when it was started until when it's delivered. However, if you look at the people, from the person's perspective, they're constantly busy. So the interesting thing here is people are busy, but work is waiting, and actually value is waiting, right? And on the converse, here we've got a situation where people are waiting. There's nothing sitting in their input queues. There's nothing on their to-do lists. So when a piece of work comes in this scenario, effectively it can flow all the way through without having to wait. And it's an interesting one for me because what it suggests is work waiting. If work has to wait, then that's a bad thing. If people are waiting, maybe it's not ideal, but at least the work is flowing and the value is flowing out. So it's a distinction that I make often in trainings and in the work that I do to help people see that this incessant focus on making sure people have a to-do list that is chock-a-block might actually be causing problems with the flow of value through our work streams.
Yeah. And I think we can even think about this a little bit in more detail. So what I see quite often is that now organizations start to optimize their teams. So let's assume your green things here, the area where persons are actually working. This is when the team is active. So, but what we've seen is that this area where people are actually working is way smaller than the wait time. So if we now start to optimize teams and we finally get to the point of high performing teams, we don't see a lot of increase in time to market because these teams, they need to collaborate. So maybe we can speed up this green area, but there's nothing that can be seen in the red area, if this makes sense. That's something what I see quite often.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Rochelle, go ahead. And Mike, we don't see you, we just see the slide.
We're not seeing your face. So just
there we go.
To add on to what Klaus is saying here, I think the change in focus from managing work instead of people is is more than just the saying in itself. It goes around how is our organization structured, and what are we visualizing to enable that thinking that it's not about the individuals. It's about the flow of value through the system and through your organization, and because that will then foster the thinking of it can't be done in isolation. Because if we're focusing on the worker or the individual, then sometimes you have a siloed approach. And I mean, it ties into the saying, and I think, Klaus, you often use that about local optimization almost always leads to global sub-optimization. And that is the premises of, if you focus on the individual, then that's going to naturally happen. We zoomed into that person, just that little piece of work, instead of the process of generating value at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think that there was, with this agile movement, there was a shift in direction of teams, which I somehow liked. So as you said, before the agile movement, we were really like optimizing individuals, right? And now, when it comes to agility, it's not so much about the individual. It's also a bit or a lot about the agile teams. However, there's still a problem. Because if the team is not able to deliver to the market without any dependencies, we end up in the same like when we are optimizing the individuals. So it's basically just a different level, more or less, if this makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly one point where flight levels can help you, and that's the message in flight levels, when we always say, okay, we need to make sure that the right team is working on the right stuff at the right time. And I think, yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
I mean, I would go a step further and say that often when we're adding more people or more teams, what it actually means is we're trying to get more done, hopefully, to better quality. And if you take 5 people who are doing certain tasks and amplify that to 50 people who are doing tasks. And instead of individuals working one after the other, it's teams that are handing off to one another. What inevitably happens is the size of the batches of work that they're working with in the team is bigger than an individual would be able to deal with. And therefore, the dependencies across teams are much more expensive usually than the dependencies across individuals. So it actually amplifies the problem I illustrated earlier with wait times. Often I've seen wait times that exceed, in one case, it was a severe case, over a year of block time on a team. So yeah. This is probably not going to happen in a room where 5 people are sitting in a garage startup. Waiting a year on one of your colleagues is unlikely, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense, yeah.
One would hope.
And, there's a question, and I think this question... oh, wow. Oh, here it is. Sorry, Cliff. The question is on your head now. So Ines Santos was asking a question. How can we coach an organization to move from managing people, like busy people, to managing flow? Any ideas about this? I mean, it's definitely a topic, right? So one thing is understanding the theory behind it. The other thing is what can we actually do? What is your take?
Yes, definitely. So, if I can jump into that, or just kickstart that, Mike, I'm going to ask if I can take over your head again.
Yes.
Your lovely face, just to think about. So there's a lot that you can take into consideration when making that shift in focus, right? And it's going to be something that needs to be done on a daily basis, because we're challenging our not just our mindset, but our frame of reference and how we react. So there's these basic, I wouldn't even call it principles, but there's these factors that you can take into account when on the journey of changing your mindset to managing flow of value rather than people. And one is to start, and I mean, we mentioned it earlier as well, just decide where you want to see the improvements. And I'm going to make the assumption that people are familiar with flight levels, seeing that this is the flight club. So it's good to understand at which level, where do we want to see improvement, and what problem are we trying to solve? Is it the question around what are we working on, and that would be your strategy or your portfolio level? Is it the coordination of multiple teams, like Klaus also mentioned, the coordination, the full coordination of value on your flight level 2, or is it just on a team focused, so the individual team basis, which is your flight level 1? So I think the starting point is to understand at which level are you at, and what are you trying to improve, and problem are you trying to solve. The second part. Yes, yeah.
Ask you a question there. Where do you find is often a good place to start? Or
so I would say as high as possible. But from my own experience in an organization, a flight level 2, your coordination, really there's a lot of power in that, in the sense that, and I'm going to quote James Baldwin, because I absolutely love, he's very smart, so he puts it in perfect sentences. It's not everything that is faced can change, but nothing can change until it's faced. And that's what the flight level 2 represents to me. It's that end-to-end coordination around what is our reality, right? What are we dealing with? And then being able to use that as a picture, as a story, and then respond to that story of your reality. So that's my experience. I don't know, do you guys have any insight into where to start?
Cliff, that's your topic, actually.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess
voluntold.
Yeah. I mean, I have a talk where I talk a little bit about a couple of different concepts, but I think part of the challenge is that very often we overlook the human aspect of this. And so we talk about, not managing the people, managing for flow, but at the end of the day, we still have to take care of the humans that are in the system, right? And I think part of it is that very often what we do is we sort of impose some change through deciding about it somewhere over here and not necessarily including everybody in the discussion of that process. And to me, I find this a little bit strange, mostly for the main reason of that you've hired a bunch of really smart people who are capable of doing really interesting things in your organization, and then you don't let them decide how to do their work or what to work on or how to solve the problem. And this to me just seems really, really odd. Like, I totally understand that everybody has to bring different opinions, and for sure, the CEO has a lot of interesting perspective on, why should we go in this direction or the strategy and so on. But you can't have everybody involved in deciding if the button is green or blue, and probably they shouldn't be deciding where it goes on the page unless they're the people who are actually making the thing. And so I think it's very important to start with the people in mind. But if you want to start and actually say, well, where are we going to introduce flight levels? I think what's helpful with this is actually to map out a little bit of like, what are we trying to achieve with this? Because it depends a little bit on the challenge you're trying to solve. And for me, I usually caution away from starting with a single team because of this challenge is that you can make one team really, really, really fast, but then it's like speeding, driving a Ferrari between traffic lights. It doesn't really make so much sense. You go flying up to the stoplight and then you sit there and you wait for the next team to go. And that team could be waiting for absolutely ages. So, if you want to see improvement, you need to start improvement at the level you're trying to see improvement, as Rochelle was saying earlier. So where do we want to see improvement? Is it projects? Is it tasks? Is it stories? Is it initiatives? Is it strategy items? What is it? And let's focus our attention on that. Yeah.
Agreed.
Interesting that you talk about that Ferrari. I've actually seen in the traffic in India when I was coaching there, there was a Ferrari and it was still surrounded by traffic.
Not moving.
Yeah. It was, anyway.
I mean, if there's anyone on the call who does drive a Ferrari, no offense intended, but I think part of the reason why people buy Ferraris is not so much to always go fast. It's because you look a certain way when you drive a Ferrari. And it's a bit of a vanity metric in a way. And it's a little bit the same thing with having super, super fast at the team level, but not with the interaction between the team, in my mind. Look at our velocity, but, are your customers happy? Do you make more money? Are you faster to market? Are you better by any metrics through which your customers would judge you? And that's usually sort of a question that I think we should be asking more often.
And what if there were 3 teams in the workflow delivering a product, and one of them was the Ferrari? They would end up creating a huge pile of work for the other teams that would never get to it.
Yeah.
That makes me think of Russell Acuff's saying around a system is not the sum of its parts, but the product of their interactions, right? And we really need to, I think, Klaus, you mentioned this once in a speech somewhere or a talk somewhere about zooming out. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I'm on Zoom all the time that is like sticking with me these days. But like, honestly, we really need to start challenging that. Let's zoom out to see what problem are we trying to solve? Where's the improvement? And then we can constantly see if we, taking the full system into account, or your full organization, and not just a specific part, not just one part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually how we currently frame the flight levels. And I know it's totally unsexy, but what we are saying is it's a thinking model that helps you to figure out where in an organization you need to do what in order to achieve what you want to achieve. And I know thinking model is really I don't know, I don't like it. But that's more or less the nature of what we are trying to do. So as you just said, zoom out, find out what is the problem and where in the organization is the lever we need to pull. So it doesn't make sense to optimize teams if, I don't know, we are building the wrong product. And it also doesn't make any sense if we, I don't know, the other way around, whatever the example now is. But I think, zoom out. I like it. Yeah.
Yes. So maybe. Oh, sorry, Mike. Yeah, you wanted to say?
Go.
No, I just wanted to go into the second part of the question that was asked. The first suggestion is to understand at which level do you want to see improvements, and the second part is visualize your reality, visualize the work in flight, and this is because that's the aha moment where we can see actually what's going on, and you'll make a lot of assumptions to say that people know if they're working in an organization or within teams, they know what's going on. That's a big assumption to make, because almost every single time when we start visualizing it, they go, oh, damn, I did not take that into account, or I didn't know this or that was involved in it. So this is really an easy, powerful way to understand what your reality is, so that you can respond to that. Bartu Kustia is one of my colleagues, and he always used to say you need to, by creating your boards or your visualization of the work in flight, it's going to tell you a story, and you need to learn how to look at that story and respond to it. Otherwise, tomorrow it's going to tell you exactly the same story. So it's kind of, understanding that the visualization is the first part, but then we need to react on it. So that's also always quite nice for me to look at.
Yeah.
And I mean, Klaus, you're saying it's not so sexy, this idea of a thinking model. And in a way, when one starts visualizing the work, after you've kind of decided where you want to start, be it at the coordination level or the strategic level or the team level, as soon as you start visualizing and co-creating, I think that's a key point, is, you don't want one person to go away and say, well, this is how the work should happen, because no one else will subscribe necessarily to their beliefs. But co-create that visualization. It's almost like instantiating that thinking model. And you're able to start seeing what's going on in your organization. So I mean, one of the things that comes out, once you're able to visualize, one of the first things that becomes apparent often is how much work there is where in the process. So, for example, here we've got a system, and it seems quite obvious to me that over here there's a whole lot of work sitting, and it's right towards the end of the process, and we're still starting new work here. But now that I'm looking at it, it seems like there's quite a problem over here. Maybe we should address it. And this is part of that story that perhaps, Rochelle, you're talking about. The board's telling us a story. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And you can make deliberate, like if it's improvements, or how do we pull together, how do we create that interaction that's needed, it can be quite focused now, because now it's on the reality instead of, we're visualizing either utopia or what we want stuff to be, and not really what's actually happening. So, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard a couple of people say is a little bit similar to what Berta was talking about, that you mentioned, Rochelle, is this idea of if you have some sort of a meeting around a board and the board doesn't change in some way, that's usually sort of a question point for me. So I'm curious, what kind of things would you expect to see changing if you're managing for flow? What kind of differences would there be as a result of something like a stand-up conversation, or maybe a portfolio board stand-up, something like this?
So I think there's a lot of things that you would want to see, right? You want to see, and it shouldn't necessarily be smooth. You want to see a little bit chaos, because that just represents reality. But I think one of the things that you should start seeing is the aging of your work items, because we're focusing on visualizing and managing work instead of people. We want to start tracking how long work takes to go through the system or through your organization from concept to cash, so that we can see if that in fact is moving, or if it's going down or not. So I think that's definitely one element to use, and as well the example or the visualization that Mike showed around the queuing. So if you see quite a lot of items in one specific state, we can try and see how we can flush it. How can we pull together to make sure that we don't get these certain states or activities that are bombarded and blocked with work. So you should see some movement there.
Yeah, I like that. I think focusing on the few things that are really important is really the key factor there. And so if you're seeing stuff moving through the board, you won't see them getting stuck in the queues or getting really, really aged.
So there's another question from Ines Santos, and then there are two other comments. It will make sense to talk about them. So Ines is asking, shall we visualize these large queues per flight level? So we were talking about these queues. So what is your experience actually? So I see these queues most of the time on the flight level 2 board. What is your experience?
So, I mean, my in direct response to the question, yes, we should probably see them on all of the levels. And I agree with Klaus. The flight level 2 board is effectively a coordination board that is going to show the impact of dependencies across various teams and waiting on each other. So when there is lots of waiting, queues start forming, and that's a key place to see them. Queues on flight level 2 are much more expensive than queues on flight level 1, because the nature of the work, it's bigger, it's chunkier items, right? So they could be projects or initiatives rather than tasks and user stories, for example. Getting queued up. So, that's my experience as well.
I think to that, my concern or signal of worry would be if you're not seeing any queues, because my experience is we live in, and especially within knowledge work, is you don't often gets in an organization or big or small where there's no waiting time. So we wanna see the reality, and even if it's not that nice, and we might be scared to visualize what's going on, that's really a must and a key differentiator between if your approach is going to be successful or not. Because that's definitely, I've seen it struck fear in people, going like, oh damn, we can't visualize this now, but that's always a good start to do it then, if it scares you a little bit. So,
I've seen it a couple of times when we start looking at the board and it looks like there's not that much on the go, and you start asking a couple of questions about, and what about that conversation we were having yesterday, and what about this offsite that we're planning over there, and that incident that occurred on Monday, and what about the new HR policy that's coming in on Tuesday, and what I've seen a couple of people do is kind of look at that board and go, oh, it looks like things are not that blocked, but it's because we're maybe not visualizing everything. So what are some of the other things? I mean, there's obviously a lot of different things that we could visualize and so on. But what are some of the things that would make sense on a flight level 2 system? What are some of the sort of types or
types? So I can give an example of it's sort of a medium-sized system, smallish to medium-sized system. I was coaching at an organization, and they built a system around about 120, 130 people across 12 teams. And they were in a business which produced line of sales software, point of sale software, and stock control, and so on. And actually did deployments, managed deployments, and would need to procure stock and install on customer premises. And what they had on their board was each value item or each ticket, and it was a physical board. Each ticket represented essentially a customer order for installation at their warehouse or at their premises. And when I arrived there, I asked the head of the PMO, how many projects do you have in flight? And very quickly she said 125, which sounded to me like too much of a well-rounded number. But I accepted it, because what did I know? When we actually sat down and co-created that system with around 20 people across that system, we discovered over 380 items in flight. And many of them had been sitting around there was one that was 720 days old. So what we saw there was a parking lot of projects, which included, we'd bought stock for these projects that were sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So a very expensive parking lot. But there are lots of different other types of items. Klaus?
Expensive parking lot. So there is a comment from Kevin Rush, and I think we can somehow connect to this. So it's already a little bit older when we were talking about zooming out. And Kevin is commenting like zooming out lets you actually focus on your outcome and not just your output, right?
Oh, yes.
So having output and outcome in the room. So what is your experience? So what is the difference between output and outcome, and how can you manage to achieve outcome better than output?
Sure, that's a very powerful actual connotation to it. I haven't actually focused on that, so that's really awesome. I think one thing, and that ties both Cliff and Klaus, what you're mentioning now. What do we track on our different flight levels? Starting off with everything, you want us to really track what is it that we consider work and what is actually in flight, and that often will be output, because we've been so focused on output and focusing on the individual or on a specific, just these isolation and silos. So you will probably at first get a lot of outputs. But then we need to start putting the processes, that thinking model that you spoke about now, Klaus, that interactions to shift the output into, let's look at the outcome. Let's see what value these outputs will make to us, and then slowly move into rather visualizing that and managing the outcome rather than the output, because it's a process. It's not going to change from the start and the get-go. It is really a journey that you need to constantly, on a daily basis, remind yourself to do. Because I find myself also sometimes, even in my personal life, I've got a visualization for myself and my husband as well. And then sometimes we're focusing a little bit too much on output there as well. House tasks to do. But so it's something that you personally have to remind yourself and create an organization and structure that will enable that change in focus from the individual to the value. So,
I was just wondering how much individual performance measurement is happening on your home board there. But I think it's a really important question, and I wish there was just one simple answer. But what comes to mind for me is so exactly as Rochelle said. I think the obvious place to start is to take stock of what's in flight. And once because usually what that represents is our tactical operation. How well are we producing, regardless of what we're producing? And if we're struggling to do that, any kind of strategy or strategic thinking, when we know that our operational delivery is not really able to produce it, it's very frustrating, and it builds this rift, the classic rift between what I often hear called the business and the tech. There's this rift that forms, and so once one's able to be honest and clear and have reliable delivery, some kind of delivery metrics that we can rely on and depend on, then it starts enabling turning strategy into action. And this is where, again, it's kind of the link between the strategic portfolio or the flight level 3 and the various coordination systems happens. So it's that link between flight level 3 and 2 so on flight level 3, we're looking at defining what are some of the outcomes we're expecting over the next over the next 90 days and perhaps even beyond that. And hopefully we've got ways to tie that back onto the flight level 2 system, so we're actually delivering it.
Yeah.
But until we can deliver, it's just pain and hurt and suffering.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, often what happens when you start out with this kind of thing, the question is like, well, we're not sure if we're doing the right stuff. And that's part of the challenge. But another way to look at it is, well, we're not delivering enough stuff. And usually I find it's a little bit of a sort of a trade-off between the two. If you don't produce any output, you probably also don't have any outcomes.
Exactly.
And you need to have some outputs in order to gauge whether the outcomes are helpful or not. And what is it about it? Was it that it was the wrong thing, or was it too late? Was it too early? These can also have effects. So it's definitely interesting to think about these two. And I like the fact that we're talking about both of them and not just one or the other. I think that's really important. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think even the comment from Jose Miguel Moreno, I don't speak Spanish, sorry. He's like, okay, maybe the first value of Agile Manifesto was responsible to this overfocus of teams and individuals, satanizing the concept of process or flow inside the organizations. What do you think? So I was just, maybe this question somehow ties into this outcome output, because it's also process in there. But yeah, what do you think, guys?
Patronizing, I love it.
If I can take a step to that, I think I'm going to tie back. Cliff, you mentioned something about looking at the human system as well. So we need to know that there's a balance, but there's once again, we need to zoom out. There's not just the one. We can't just focus on one element. There's the system of work, and then there's the human system tied to that as well. And I think we, as a natural, I don't know why, but as human beings, we kind of get caught up in one, and then we just focus on the one, and then we create measurements for that one as well. And then that starts driving behavior. And then we go, okay, great, we want to create this environment, this lovely environment for people, but now that means we need to manage people as well. And now that means that we need to put measurements in place to see how efficient and effective you are working as a person, that 100% efficiency or effectiveness or whatever, that lovely stuff is all about. But then we've kind of lost the plot in it. It's not about managing the people. It's about managing the work and knowing that there's a human system that you need to nourish and take care of as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, what came to mind for me was, the rebel in me, and there's plenty of it. The
I had
rebel
no
in
idea,
me
Mike.
says,
I really had it.
says that, I enjoy the satanizing, because what it did, let's put it that way, what it did was it poked at the question why. Why are we doing it like that? And a lot of this institutional process is decades old in cases. And I've even heard the statement, this is how insurance works. It's worked like this for 100 years and will work like this for the next 100 years. And, it's stuff like that just says, okay, well, let's just follow the process. And the recipe has been concocted before us by clever people. If we just follow it, it'll carry on working and it will improve maybe even. So what I like about what the focus on teams did was it started challenging traditional thinking. And now, but contrary to, well, maybe not contrary, maybe as a next step to that, what I like about flight levels is kind of saying, well, okay, so you've got some agile, maybe not, but teams, but you're still having difficulty delivering. Well, let's see what the process is. And that starts the question of, is the process and the workflow that's in place, is it actually serving what we're trying to do? So we're able to chip away and remove parts that aren't and add improvements as we go. So that's kind of what I like about flight levels and flow-based systems.
So, Mike, if I can add on to it, sorry, how you described it, triggered a thought in my mind now. So it's not just about flow of value as well. So like you said, now focusing on the teams, flight levels allows you the opportunity to unpack, okay, great, what's the flow of decision-making, flow of information through your organization, all of these elements that can help us generate that value at the end, and that's the outcome that we want at the end of the day. So it actually allows you to start having those interactions, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And you reminded me. Oh,
no, go ahead, Mike.
So
I was just thinking.
Continue doing that.
We're just bouncing. So Cliff was asking earlier, what would you like to see, or what do you see changing around a board or around a visualization? And for me, one of the biggest things is conversation. So now that we can see, we've got a single a view that we can all look at the work through, we can start having conversations that otherwise would not have existed. So it's the most powerful part for me. Is it's never really about the visualization, but it's about the conversations it enables. And that for me is really awesome to watch. Yeah.
Cool. And I think there's a very good follow-up question here from Christian Ribeiro. He's asking, and what about the people management side? So we were always talking about, so manage flow, not people, but what about the people management side? would focus on the process only impact how the individual work/performs to achieve the outputs?
So, yeah, I think the stance of the manager is enabled to change. So there are times when it makes sense, and for me the word manage or manager is focused around ensuring that the right people are doing the right tasks, and so on. And if we have another way to achieve that same result, if not better, then perhaps the managers can focus more on leading. And what I mean by that is leading through creating new experiences in the organization that can enable and empower people to make better decisions, to make to grow, and these kinds of things. So in fact, they're able to focus even more on the human element, and less on chastising or on so on. And so it doesn't disappear. The role of the manager, I think, is an important one. And yeah, so it's almost like manager to leader, to coach, to individual grower, right? Yeah.
And it's not that we're managing people versus managing process. It's managing flow of value, right? So that's really we need to make sure that we don't forget that, because too often it goes hand in hand with, okay, great. So if we're focusing on value, we tie it, okay, then it's a process, and it's just that visualization and that, but it's more than that. It's actually what value are we giving to our customers, and how do we, as a manager, create and inspire that self-organization within our organization to get that done at the end, and not tell them or keep them busy, because we're just gonna, if you're focusing on getting or keeping people busy, you're just going to get busy people, right? So that's not necessarily going to help anyone. It's just going to frustrate someone and give them a lot of admin tasks to do, right? So then of course you sit in a situation where people that's saying of employees don't quit their jobs, but they quit their management because not that it's always true, but then you fall into a scenario of that, right? So instead of stepping into a leadership position,
I heard in one boardroom, our job in sales is to bury the bastards, referring to the teams.
Wow.
So, which I just thought, well, that's indicative of keep them so busy. But we know that if that's true, you'll get lots of sales, but no delivery.
But onto that, Mike. So that's a culture that runs deep of focusing still on the person. It's maybe now not on that individual, it's now on that team. So we're focusing on our team, and we need to, keep them busy. Yeah. But them is still part of the process of delivering value. So if we don't deliberately start changing our thinking model or our thinking approach to our organization, then we're going to just create these wonderful silos that work great, but putting them together is just going to completely bomb out. So like your Ferrari analogy.
But that's also something that what I see so often, it's always us and them. And no matter how you change the org structure, it's us and them. So if you go from functional silos, the testers, it's them. We are the heroes. And if you are doing cross-functional teams, then it's the other cross-functional team who is the loser and we are the good ones. And if you change to product team, it's of course the other product. So no matter what you do, so you can't solve this with a reorganization. It's a cultural thing. So for me, and that's what I see so often when organizations think that, okay, if we only have cross-functional teams or product teams, all these problems are gone away. No, they're just shifting. So cross-functional teams has nothing to do with org structure. Cross-functional teams, for me at least, is a fundamental cultural aspect, and it's not about how people are structured in the organization in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense.
And and it also begs that question: what is self-organization? I've been in so many organizations where there's like a really strong desire from management to really give and empower people. And often what I hear from those managers is that they're, we're saying, here you go, it's yours, but they're not taking ownership. And I hear this a lot. And then I witness what's happening. And usually, the same manager is going and helping the team when they get stuck, which is surprisingly often. And then they get told what to do. So it's this lack of authority that people are given. I quite enjoy Hackman's matrix. I'm not sure if you know it, self-organization matrix, which shows 4 different levels of self-organizing teams, 4 different stages, from manager-led all the way through to self-directing. And it's quite a good read.
I like one of the quotes from Don Reinertsen. He says, if you want to decentralize decision making, you need to not only decentralize the authority to make decisions, but also the information that is necessary to make good decisions. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of people miss. And specifically with a flight level 2 and a flight level 3 system, I think part of what it starts to provide is some of the contextual information about why is this thing more important than that thing? Or what is driving the motivation for that thing to be such a big issue? Is it simply that sales, were trying to bury us? Or is there actually something, there's a market opportunity or there's a window of opportunity or some kind of motivation behind it? Is that actually the number one thing to be working on? And so I really like this idea of remembering it's not just about, saying, go forth, you're now free to make decisions. You also have to support people with the right kind of context and information and tools in order to be able to do it effectively. So, we are getting close to the end of time. And so I want to extend one last invitation to everybody and say, if you have a question that you would like to have answered in this session, please go ahead and stick it in the chat. And of course, if you're enjoying the conversation so far, please subscribe, join us on Meetup. You'll get announcements about future events and so on. But let's kick it over and take a couple of questions and see what else there is that you'd like to know about. And we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes. I was wondering maybe in the meantime, if we can talk just a little bit about what kind of things do you see as the impact? Like if you were sort of arrive at a company and you see they're managing their flow really well, what sort of things do you see in that situation?
So I see empowered sales and marketing type people or the business people, in the sense of, often one's out trying to make a target and sell as much as possible so that the pipeline gets full and we make money, and that makes sense. But empowered in the way that if you're running a flow system, it means that we really have strong levels of predictability and reliability of the data, the delivery data. And if this is the case, then the business forerunners are able to use that data in the conversations they have with clients. So I often see the contracting conversations changing, and that's something, as well as less bags under the eyes for the delivery team members.
True. Yeah. So one thing that I notice is if there's really a focus on flow of value, is you'll see that there's a pull system rather than a push, because then a push system is often, and this means like even on the flight level 2, right? So and it rolls up from flight level 1 to flight level 2, and if really awesome, it can even be pulled from flight level 3. But if you can see that there's a pull system within flight level 2, meaning that work isn't just forced down, and and not taking into account, do we have a capacity to actually pull a new piece of work in, and that conversation that's happening, that dialogue, the decision making that's happening on the work, is this the right piece of work that we need to focus on? That's really a big differentiator for me. If you're focusing on flow, then you've created a pull system rather than push, because push is individually focused. It's again the person and not the work.
It's true. There's more intelligent and meaningful discussion around what should we do next, as opposed to the obvious answer, everything. Which is what happens without a flow system.
Yes, so, everything is priority 1.
Yeah. So it forces the issue on the value discussion, which is cool.
Yeah, there is a comment from Fabio Cabral, which probably goes into this direction. His comment is like, okay, visualize the end-to-end flow and map how the work arrives and leaves. So talking about arrival is a lot about starting, right? So Rochelle, you were just saying, okay, push is one kind of arrival and pull would be another one, right? But the question what I get quite often here, so when we switch from push to pull, still the work needs to be done. So now the work is sitting somewhere outside of the system, but nobody's working on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
No,
how can we solve this?
Well, I think it's a good thing if you have more demand than what you can actually work on, right? Because that means that it's good. It's business that's coming in some way or form. But it is, I think, the true business agility is how quickly can you replenish without overloading your system. That is really and I think I'm quoting again you, Klaus, so sorry for that. But you're just so clever person, you've got these awesome sayings, but it's true. There will always be that, and we need to visualize all of those options. So it's still part of your end-to-end coordination, but it's on, are we going to accept to start with everything, or have we changed to finishing before we start? Because starting work costs money, but finishing work makes money. So we need to weigh those two against each other, right?
And I mean, this is kind of what I was saying in terms of the force of the discussion about value up front, and the change in contracting models often. So the classic contracting is, here's how much it's going to cost for us to deliver this, and we'll schedule it to start next week, right? And then it starts or it doesn't, but we tell the customer it started, and we give them updates along the way that everything's going well, right? But if we've got data about our delivery, we know that it's number 7 in the queue to reach the front of the delivery system. And we know how many items we're delivering every week. So we know how long it's going to be before we start it. And we know how long it's going to take to get through the system. So we've actually got data which can really arm us, the business people, with useful bargaining tools in terms of, if it's urgent, we can do it in this speed, but it's going to cost you more. or whatever. So yeah, I think it enables that discussion. It's not about we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's just we're not going to start it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's a whole interesting branch of economics around this. If you look at options theory and so on, about how do you make good decisions about when should we start something and keeping your options open for as long as possible. And I like this idea. Peter, our colleague, used to always talk about this. This idea of the last responsible moment. If you can keep your options open without any sort of significant difference in cost until the last minute, it's a good idea to do that, because as soon as you've paid the money is gone. And you may or may not get the value that you were expecting. But if you hold on to it, you've got the money and you can still invest it or buy something else or do something different with it. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Cool. We're actually at time, and so I'd like to draw to a close. I wanted to just remind people about a couple of things. So first up, we will be doing this every 2 weeks or so, and the next time will be on the 2nd of July. It's on a Thursday this time. We'll announce everything in a little bit in more detail, but we'll be talking about flight level strategy boards at Bayer. So we have some folks who will be telling us about their journey and their experience of it, and so that's sure to be a good one. So make sure you tune in for that. And then just to end off, I want to thank everybody who's been joining us on the live stream. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for subscribing and for hanging out with us this afternoon. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you next time. And the last thing before we go, thank you very much to Mike and Rochelle. It's been wonderful to have you as guests. We look forward to having you again sometime in the future. Yeah. And yeah, to everybody, have a great time. Do you want to say any closing words?
This was awesome. Yes. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thanks. Bye,
Cheers.
guys. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.